"Please buy my bike. My mom is starving," the child said. The bikers were stunned by the truth. The heat hung heavy over Maple Oak, the kind of still afternoon that made time slow down. Lawns were trimmed, sprinklers clicked in quiet rhythm, and the hum of suburban life rolled on with mechanical calm. Until the thunder came. It started as a low growl, then it roared. Engines, deep, heavy, unapologetic, shook the quiet straight out of the trees. A pack of motorcycles tore down the residential street, chrome flashing under the sun. Residents peeked through curtains. A few dads stepped onto porches. One mum instinctively pulled her kid closer. The burning saints had arrived. Leather jackets, tattoos, boots that looked like they'd kicked down more than just doors. They rumbled to a stop near the small public park at the end of the block. No one spoke. The engines idled, then cut out. Silence fell again, deeper now. Charged. The leader was the last to dismount. A tall man with a lean build, broad shoulders, and eyes like smoked glass. He took off his helmet, revealing a face weathered by more than sun. His name was Luke, but most just called him Hawk. He lit a cigarette, scanned the street, and was about to speak when a small voice cut through the silence. "Excuse me." "Sir." Heads turned. A little girl stood at the edge of the sidewalk, just past the shadow of a maple tree. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her hair was tangled, her shoes didn't match, and her t-shirt had a faded unicorn peeling off the front. In her small hands, she held a cardboard sign with a single phrase scribbled in red marker. "For sale, pink bike, 10. Behind her, leaned against the curb, was the pink bicycle. Scuffed, one handle grip missing, streamers frayed, but clearly loved once. The front wheel was tilted like it limped. The saints stared, confused, curious. Hawk took a step forward. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice gravel and calm. "You trying to sell that bike?" She nodded. "It's still good. Just needs a little air. You can ride it, or give it to your kid, or you could sell it again for more." The smallest member of the crew, a lanky redhead called Trigger, smirked. "What the hell's going on?" "Shut it," Hawk said quietly, eyes still on the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophie." "Sophie," he repeated. "Where are your parents?" She hesitated, then pointed to a tree about 30 feet away. Beneath it, slumped on a patch of shade, was a woman. Thin, pale, motionless, but breathing. Her clothes hung off her like they'd once fit right. A shopping bag lay beside her, empty except for a crushed water bottle. "That your mum?" Sophie nodded again. "She's sick." "She's hungry," Sophie said plainly. "She hasn't eaten in 2 days. I was going to get food with the money." No one spoke. Not the gang. Not the bystanders who'd started to gather. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Hawk walked over to the bike, knelt down beside it. "This yours?" "Yes." "You like it?" Sophie looked up at him. Serious, determined. "I love it, but I love her more." He looked over at the sign again, then at her. Her hands were trembling, but her back was straight. She wasn't begging. She was offering a deal. That did something to him. Hawk stood. "Keep the bike." "You don't need to sell anything," he said. He turned to one of his crew. "Tank, grab the box." Tank, a mountain of a man with a beard that belonged in a forest, walked over to one of the saddlebags and pulled out a weathered metal box. Inside, protein bars, canned fruit, water bottles, and jerky. They'd stocked it for road survival. They handed it to Sophie, but she hesitated. "I didn't earn this." "You will," Hawk said, "by telling me what happened." She glanced at her mother. "She used to clean offices downtown, but then the man in charge said they didn't need her anymore, even though she worked really hard. He said she made them look bad." "Name?" Sophie shrugged. "She said his name on the phone once, Mr. Collins. She cried a lot after that." The name hit Hawk like a punch to the ribs. Collins, he knew that name. Corporate giant, media darling, the same guy who smiled for the cameras while cutting paychecks behind the scenes. Claimed to build charities while breaking the backs of workers. Hawk had seen his kind before. He'd watched his own mother get dropped from her job with no warning, no severance, just silence and locked doors. Hawk crouched beside the girl. "Is your mum awake?" Sophie nodded. "She doesn't talk much right now." "Let me talk to her, just a little." Sophie watched him carefully, then gave a small nod. Hawk walked over to the tree, knelt beside the woman. She was barely conscious, but her eyes opened when he offered water. She drank, slowly, gratefully. "You're Nancy, right?" he asked. She nodded faintly. "You worked for Collins?" Another nod. Her voice was a whisper. 12 years. And he just let you go. Didn't want people to see me cleaning during a charity event. Said I didn't match the image." A bitter smile. "Guess being poor isn't pretty." Hawk sat back, the storm already forming behind his eyes. Nancy reached out, touched his arm. "Please don't scare her, Sophie. She's all I have." "She's stronger than most grown men I know," Hawk said. He walked back to the crew, who were already handing Sophie more supplies from the bikes. Hawk looked down at the cardboard sign still in her hand. He took it gently. Sophie looked up. "Are you going to buy the bike now?" "No," Hawk said. "I'm going to keep this, but not because I'm buying anything." She didn't understand, but she trusted him. Hawk turned to the rest of the saints. "We're heading out." "Where?" Tank asked. "To see a man about a lie." And with that, the engines roared to life once again. But this time, they didn't just rumble, they burned. Hawk tucked the cardboard sign into his jacket, and as they rode away, he didn't look back at the bike, because some things weren't for sale, not anymore. Back at the edge of town, the burning Saints' garage sat like a fortress of grease, leather, and chrome. The smell of oil and gasoline clung to the air, mingling with the weight of silence that had settled over the place since they returned. Inside, Hawk stood alone in the back room, staring at the pink bicycle. It leaned against the wall beside a cluttered workbench, its paint chipped, the front tire slightly deflated. The for sale sign lay flat on the table, the red marker faded slightly from the ride back. It looked out of place there, surrounded by wrenches, chains, and engine parts. But then again, so did Hawk. He didn't speak, didn't move, just kept his eyes on the sign like it was talking to him. Behind him, the garage doors creaked open. "You've been staring at that thing for 20 minutes, said Tank, stepping in with a grease-stained rag slung over his shoulder. "You planning to ride it or frame it?" Hawk didn't answer. Trigger walked in next, grabbing a soda from the old fridge. "Seriously, man, you don't usually go soft for stuff like this." "You get quiet, yeah, but this is different," Hawk exhaled through his nose. "She reminded me of someone." "Who?" He took a long pause. "My mother." The others went still. They all knew Hawk didn't talk about his past. Ever. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. "She used to work double shifts cleaning offices. Same as Nancy," Hawk said, his voice low. "One day, her boss cut her loose because the company couldn't afford janitors anymore. But they'd just spent $500,000 remodeling the lobby." He clenched his jaw. "I remember watching her beg for food at a gas station, just enough for a sandwich. She was proud, but hunger breaks pride, every damn time." He looked back at the sign. "Nancy didn't ask us for help. Sophie didn't cry. That little girl tried to sell the one thing that gave her joy just to feed her mom." Trigger shifted uncomfortably. "So, what do we do? We're not exactly running a soup kitchen." "We're not running from this either," Hawk said, standing. "This ain't about charity, it's about consequence." Tank raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Collins needs to see what his decisions look like at ground level." "You planning on knocking on his door and giving him a moral lecture?" "No," Hawk said. "We ride." The Collins Corporation Tower was a mirrored monolith in the heart of downtown. Glass, steel, and egos stacked 40 stories high. The company's name gleamed from the rooftop in polished chrome letters, as if daring the world to challenge it. At exactly noon, the burning Saints rolled up the main drive like thunderclouds on wheels. Pedestrians scattered. Security guards tensed. Someone filming with their phone whispered, "Are we getting robbed or rescued?" But the bikers didn't storm the building. They parked, deliberately, defiantly, right at the front entrance. Inside, high on the 34th floor, Edward Collins was finishing a latte when his assistant buzzed in. "Sir, there's a motorcycle gang downstairs." "A what?" "A gang. They say they're here to see you. They're not being aggressive yet." Collins chuckled. "Let them wait. I don't take meetings with people who smell like exhaust." He turned back to his panoramic window, sipping his drink with smug detachment. An hour passed. Then 2. Downstairs, the saints waited, silent, unmoving, unreadable. Their presence was its own language. They didn't protest, they didn't threaten. They just existed in a space where they were never meant to be, and that somehow was louder than shouting. Eventually, curiosity and corporate pressure wore Collins down. He agreed to meet them. The executive conference room was all polished marble and cold luxury. Collins sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, flanked by 2 security guards in tailored suits. He looked bored. Hawk walked in first, followed by Tank and Trigger. The rest stayed downstairs. "Let's make this quick," Collins said, flipping through his phone. "I assume this is about a grievance or some kind of PR stunt." Hawk pulled the "for sale" sign from inside his jacket and laid it gently on the table in front of him. Collins raised an eyebrow. "What is that? Art?" Hawk didn't smile. "It's the story of a little girl who thought the only way to save her mother was to sell her bike. Because you fired Nancy Hill without cause, because you wanted the lobby of your building to look cleaner for a charity event." Collins scoffed. "I don't personally handle terminations. We have HR for that. If someone didn't meet standards, she worked for you for over a decade. She scrubbed toilets. She fed her daughter on that paycheck. That's not my concern." Hawk stepped closer. His voice dropped into something darker, quieter. "It is now." Collins leaned back, unimpressed. "What, you want money? Sympathy? Are you threatening me?" "We don't do threats," Hawk said. "We do truth. And the truth is, every choice you make trickles down. You don't see it, you don't feel it. But people like Nancy, they drown in it." Collins looked at the sign again, his face unreadable. "You're wasting your time." "Maybe," Hawk said, "but I'd rather waste time doing something decent than save time being a coward." He turned to leave, then paused. She didn't want a handout. She wanted to earn back her dignity. "All we're doing is making sure you know what you cost her." They walked out without another word. Collins sat in silence for a long time. The "for sale" sign stayed on the table. He didn't throw it away. He didn't touch it. But he stared at it like it might burn through the glass. Later that night, back at the garage, the crew sat around the fire pit outside, beers in hand, faces lit by orange flame. "You think it worked?" Trigger asked. "It doesn't matter," Hawk said. "We didn't go there to change him. We went there so he can't say he didn't know." Tank nodded slowly. "Sometimes just showing up is the loudest thing you can do." Hawk didn't answer. He was looking at the pink bike again. Only this time he wasn't just thinking about the girl. He was thinking about the man behind the glass desk, wondering if he was still looking at that sign, wondering if maybe, just maybe, something had cracked. Not broken, not yet, but cracked enough to let a little light in. Edward Collins hadn't slept in 2 nights. The silence of his penthouse, once a badge of power, now felt cavernous. The city lights outside glittered like broken promises, reflected in the floor-to-ceiling windows of a life built on polish and denial. The "for sale" sign was still sitting on his desk. He hadn't meant to keep it. In fact, when he got back from the meeting with the bikers, his first instinct was to throw it in the trash. But something in him couldn't. It sat there now, flattened and quiet. Cardboard, marker, child's handwriting, $10. For food. For her mother. He poured another glass of whiskey but barely sipped it. Instead, he opened his laptop and logged into the company system. He typed in Nancy Hill, fired 4 months ago, no severance, no benefits extension, reason for dismissal, appearance inconsistency with event standards. He sat back in his chair. The words stung more than he expected. He clicked again and again. Then he couldn't stop. One by one, Collins began pulling up old files. Terminations, pay cuts, suspensions, dozens of them, Many weren't even signed off by him. They were automated or processed by PR teams to avoid optics. In several cases, there were written pleas for reconsideration that never reached him. A cleaning crew lead let go for brand optics. A warehouse supervisor fired after asking for medical leave. A receptionist terminated for being too chatty during Investor Week. He saw their names, their years of service, their slow erasure, and he realized that he'd become the kind of man his younger self would have despised. Collins closed the laptop. He didn't cry, but something cracked inside, quietly, like a fire starting deep underground. Across town, the burning saints were back in the garage, their rides cooling off after a long trip to deliver a custom wheelchair ramp to a veteran's home. Their work wasn't about glory. It never had been. But this time, something felt different. Hawk had started making quiet supply runs to Nancy and Sophie's neighborhood. He didn't knock on their door. He didn't even stay long. Just left food, medicine, warm blankets, always when they weren't looking. Nancy noticed, of course. The first time she found a basket of groceries on her porch, she assumed it was a fluke. The second time, she stayed up all night trying to catch the delivery. When she finally did, it was Trigger, awkwardly ducking into the shadows with a paper bag full of cough syrup and protein shakes. "You could have knocked," she said from the window. "Didn't want to wake the kid," he muttered, then sped off into the dark like a guilty teenager. It wasn't long before she figured out it was all them, the bikers, the scary-looking crew with kind eyes and heavy boots. She didn't trust it at first. Life had taught her not to, but the supplies kept coming. The food didn't stop. Sophie started smiling again, and Nancy, still tired, still thin, began to believe in something she hadn't in years, that not everyone left you when it got hard. One night, as Hawk sat beside her under the same tree where they'd first met, she spoke up. "I used to think people like Collins were heroes," she said. "Clean suits, big smiles, charity events. Thought he'd be the kind to help someone like me." Hawk said nothing. "He looked me in the eye the day he fired me," she continued. "Didn't blink, told me I didn't fit the image." "Your daughter's tougher than anyone in his building," Hawk said. "She gets that from her father." "He around?" "Cancer. 2 years ago." Hawk nodded slowly. They both stared out into the quiet. Nancy tilted her head. "Why are you really doing this?" "Because someone once did it for me," Hawk said. That was all she needed to know. Back at the Collins Corporation Tower, strange things had begun happening. The accounting department noticed a sharp uptick in anonymous donations linked to Collins's personal fund. Entire hospital bills were paid off in cash. Grocery debts cleared. Rent covered in full, signed with only 2 words: "Make right." Collins's assistant found him re-reviewing old HR documents, reinstating employees without fanfare. He brought back 2 cleaning staff, rehired the warehouse supervisor, offered a part-time role to a single father he'd once overlooked. He didn't announce any of it. He didn't even want credit. It was the pink bicycle. That damn bike. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. Not because it was pitiful, but because it was proud. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a deal. A 6-year-old trying to fix the world the only way she knew how. And he'd nearly let that kind of courage slip past him unnoticed. Weeks later, at a local community event, Sophie stood by the park entrance with her bike. Newly repaired, wheels straightened, streamers bright again thanks to the saint's quiet handiwork. It wasn't flashy, but it was hers. Someone, a well-dressed woman passing by, smiled and asked, "How much for the bike?" Sophie looked at her, dead serious. "It's not for sale." "Oh, come on, sweetie," the woman laughed. "I'll give you $50. It's adorable." "No," Sophie said, backing away slightly. "This bike feeds nobody now, it just reminds me." "Reminds you of what?" Sophie stared past the woman at the tree across the street, at the spot where her mother once lay too weak to sit up, at the bench where a biker had first knelt to talk to her, at the shadows where strangers became protectors. "That some things shouldn't be sold," she said. The woman blinked. "Well, okay then." Sophie rode off, slow and steady. The bike creaked a little, but it carried her like it always had, like it always would. Collins never told anyone where he went that evening, but if someone had followed him, they'd have seen a man in an expensive coat standing quietly across the street from a small park. No limo, no assistance, just him. He watched a little girl ride a pink bike in slow circles, her laughter rising into the dusk. He saw a woman on a bench reading a book, wrapped in a clean jacket, her hair brushed and her eyes clear for the first time in a long while. He saw a small plaque nailed to the tree trunk beside them. He couldn't read it from that distance, but he didn't need to. He knew what it said. And for the first time in years, Edward Collins turned away, not out of shame, but because the work ahead was no longer about guilt. It was about earning the right to look someone in the eye again. He disappeared into the dark without a word. No credit, no applause. Just a man walking away from the wreckage he built, towards something better, one step at a time. The pink bicycle was no longer for sale. Its frame had been repainted with care, the rust smoothed over and replaced with a soft coral shimmer. Bright stickers covered the fenders, stars, animals, lightning bolts, all picked out by Sophie herself, who declared, "It rides faster with stickers." Hawk didn't argue. He just smiled as she tore down the sidewalk, legs pumping like she was racing time itself, laughter trailing behind her. Nancy stood nearby, stronger now, still thin, still cautious, but her eyes held color again. The small shelter behind her, a sturdy one-room outpost built by the Burning Saints, stood nestled between two trees at the edge of the park. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, dry, and hers, and it had a door she could lock, a place to breathe. She looked over and caught Hawk watching. He sat on the low wooden steps beside the shelter, boots planted, elbows on knees. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Better than most." Nancy walked over, sat beside him. They watched Sophie zoom by again. "She's not the same girl you met that day." "She is," Hawk said. "She's just not hungry anymore." Nancy laughed quietly. "You know, when I first saw you, when you all rolled in with your engines and your boots, I thought you were here to make trouble." "We were." She looked at him. "Just not the kind people expect," he added. A few days later, a plain envelope arrived at the Burning Saints garage. There was no return address, no logo. Just Hawk's name on the front, written in firm, clean handwriting. He didn't open it right away. He stood in the garage's back office for nearly 5 minutes, just holding it. It was heavy, not with weight, but with feeling, with something unspoken. When he finally tore it open, a single photograph slipped out and fell onto the desk. He stared at it. It was a black and white photo. Old, worn around the edges. A woman standing in front of a gas station, smiling at the camera with tired eyes and grace in her posture. She wore a plain work uniform and held a paper bag in one hand. Behind her, taped to the store window, was a hand-drawn "Help Wanted" sign. It was his mother. Hawk swallowed hard. He hadn't seen that picture in decades. Thought it was gone forever. Beneath the photo was a note. Just 5 words, handwritten in the same steady print. "I thought she mattered too." No name, no signature, just that. But Hawk knew who it was from. He stood there for a long time, the photo in one hand, the note in the other, as the sun poured through the garage windows and laid gold across the concrete floor. Elsewhere, not far from the park, Edward Collins stood behind the tinted glass of a parked car, watching from a distance. He wasn't there to be seen. He didn't expect a thank you. He just wanted to witness something real. He watched Nancy laugh as Sophie tried to teach her how to ride the bike, watched the girl wobble in circles around the shelter, the streamers on her handlebars flicking like tiny flames. There was something healing about the sound of that laughter, something Collins hadn't heard in a long time, not since before the meetings, the metrics, the persona. He stayed only a few minutes. Long enough. As he stepped back into the car, he looked down at his hands. Once they'd signed papers that changed lives without thought. Now they trembled a little, not with fear, but with the weight of having made something right, if only in part. The driver pulled away without a word. At sunset, the Burning Saints rolled out again. Their engines echoed through the town like the call of something ancient and alive, something that didn't need to be understood to be felt. They didn't announce where they were going. They never did. Hawk led the pack as always, but this time he wasn't burdened. He rode light. He rode clear. Behind him, Tank, Trigger, and the others followed in tight formation. Their jackets bore the same emblem, a burning winged halo, a symbol misunderstood by many. But that didn't matter. Symbols weren't made to be explained. They were meant to be carried. As they passed the park, Sophie stood by the curb waving, her pink bike beside her. Her hair blew wild in the wind, her eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. Nancy stood beside her, arm over her daughter's shoulder, holding her steady. Hawk raised his hand slightly as he passed, a nod more than a wave. Sophie lifted her sign, not the original cardboard one, but a new plaque, hand-painted in bold colors and nailed to the old tree. Not for sale, ever. It caught the fading sunlight and shimmered like fire. They say not all fires burn to destroy, some burn to clear the way, to warm, to guide. And in the quiet spaces where people forget to look, behind office towers, beneath trees, inside garages that hum with engine song, those fires still burn, quietly, faithfully, like saints on the road.